Welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast with your host, Alvin Bonds II. Join us each week as Alvin explores the relationship between leadership and families by interviewing leaders in different fields all over the world. Alvin believes that the success of tomorrow's leaders begins with the success of today's families.
Hello, and welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast. I am your host, Alvin Bonds II, and this is episode 7. Today, I interview Kyle Spurgeon. Kyle is the president and CEO of the Jackson, Tennessee Chamber of Commerce. Before we get to my interview with Kyle, I want to take just a moment and invite you to reflect on job, family, or job, personal, just work-life balance. One of the things that Kyle mentions in his interview is how he balances his life or the priorities that he identifies in his life. As you listen to my interview with Kyle, think about your own lives. How do you balance your work and your life? How do you decide when enough is enough? Some people have 9-to-5 jobs where you clock in, you clock out, and you work 37 to 40 hours a week. Some people have jobs that require them to work more. Some may work part-time. Some may work from home. Some may be entrepreneurs. There's different setups to everyone's work and life. I invite you to reflect on your life if you are working and think about how your life and your family and the balance or lack of balance that you have for your family, how does it compare to you when you were a child and your parents or guardian? Do you work? Are you a husband or your wife? Do both people work in your family? Did your mom and dad or your parents or your grandparents, aunts, uncle, whatever guardian you had at the time, did both of them work? Who prepared lunch? Who prepared breakfast? Who ironed? Who cooked dinner? All of these things are responsibilities that must take place in a home. Some may be fortunate to have someone who cleans for them, or someone who irons or cooks or takes care of the day-to-day household chores so that the individuals can just focus on work or school or whatever the case may be. Everyone's situation is different. But I encourage you to really reflect on how best are we spending our time. And if we look at where we spend our time, that tells us what is most important in our lives. If we spend more of our time at work, and our work may be life-changing. We may be saving lives. We may be creating vaccines. We may, whatever the case may be, it is also important to have balance. Life is not just about going to work and dying. Life is about living, and it's important that we find a way to make that balance. I read something a while back. It said, you have the same hours in a day as Beyonce. That's true. Beyonce, Jay-Z, any actress or actor or anyone with wealth or influence, they have the same amount of time that we have in a day. What we do with that is up to us. Now, we could say, well, Beyonce has people to drive her around. She has people to fly. She has someone that does her shopping for her. She has someone who does all of the menial tasks that many of us have to do ourselves. That may or may not be true. Even still, she's found a way to make it happen. I have no information or knowledge about how Beyonce balances her life. She could spend every day in the studio, for all I know. I do know that she has children. She has a husband and she has 3 children now, 2 newborn twins. So I imagine at a minimum, if she's nursing her children, she's having to be home or be available for them. But again, I don't know the specifics, but I do know that each of us has an opportunity to change the world. But it's important that we find a balance and that we identify what is a priority in our lives. And again, if you look at where most of your time is invested, that tells you where your priorities are. As I said, Kyle is the president and CEO of the Jackson, Tennessee Chamber of Commerce. Kyle is also the past president of the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce Executives. Before joining the chamber, Kyle was the vice president of corporate relations for the Jackson Energy Authority. He also served as marketing director for the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development and was previously the director of economic development for the Jackson Chamber from 1993 to 1999. Kyle has helped facilitate project locations representing more than $2 billion in capital investment. I'm grateful for Kyle taking a few moments out of his busy day to do this interview with me. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm President and CEO of the Jackson Chamber, a great position. I've been in this job for almost 8 years now, and my career actually in the chamber business, my second chamber job, or maybe third, I guess, was here back in the 90s. I've been in this field ever since the late 80s and grew up in Paris, Tennessee, went to school at Murray State University, and lived in West Tennessee my whole life. I have 3 kids. Blake's 24, Shelby is 20, Matt is 16, and I work with a great staff here at the Chamber, and we get to do everything from economic development, recruiting new companies to Jackson, working with existing industry, and all that's about growing jobs in the community. And then we also work a lot on the place side, quality of life, making Jackson a better place to make sure folks stay here and grow here and want to be a part of it. Chamber leadership programs, Leadership Jackson, Leadership University, you may have heard of. We work with small businesses. Alvin, we do a lot. And like I said, I'm just very blessed to work with a great team.
And I'm a chamber member myself, and so I definitely am grateful for the opportunities and things that you all provide. And there are lots of things that the chamber does in terms of developing leaders. I'm interested in knowing, when you think of leadership, what do you think about?
When I think of leadership, actually, one of the things that's almost it'll be hard to do is you follow things like Twitter or something. There's always all these quotes out there, and so you could spend days talking about what leadership is. But I think it just boils down, for me at this organization, is someone that leads a team toward a goal, does it in a way where you maximize the strengths of every single person on the team. And it's old and it's been said a lot, but there is no I in team.
Yeah.
But you dig deeper, there's a whole lot of eyes that are on that team.
That's right.
And you can accomplish a whole lot if you don't worry about who gets credit. And a leader is also someone that has to be a follower at times. There are projects here, and my position is president, CEO, but that does not mean that I lead every single thing that we do. I put myself in a position to be a follower at times to when we've got someone managing a project that's on our team that it may just be simply moving furniture around downstairs, or it may be participating in a visit with a company, and Mandy White leads our economic development team. So, I do what she tells me to when someone's here. So you got to be a follower at times too.
And I agree with that 100%. If everybody wants to be in charge, then we're not really doing anything. So there needs to be a balance. What or who has helped influence that type of leadership philosophy?
I look back and give 3 folks credit, and I actually spoke about this last year at an event in Jackson. Obviously, my dad. I look back and think any work ethic that I've got comes from my dad growing up. I've worked doing something ever since I was 12 years old. And some of that might have been washing cars or mowing the yard or whatever that is. But I've worked in some type of job ever since I was 12 years old. So my dad, with work ethic, my dad's boss, a gentleman by the name of Joe Mahan in Paris, I watched him growing up and really probably not even knowing it at the time, the impact he was having, but how he led the team where my dad worked at a Ford dealership up there, but was also a very influential person in the community. Mm-hmm. And then my career here in Jackson, John Williams, who was president and CEO of Jackson Energy Authority, was the most impactful person I've ever worked directly for. John had a vision for what he wanted to accomplish within his organization, what he expected from his team. And I tell a story about when I first met John. I was here at the Chamber back in the 90s, the first time I worked here. And I'd made a mistake on pricing some industrial park property. And John called me, and really it was one of those conversations where I figured the next day I was going to be out of a job because he let me have it. But you know who was the person in my office the first thing the next morning at 8 o'clock? It was John Williams.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, this is why I got upset, and this is how you can improve. And I watched him do that when I worked for him at Jackson Energy Authority. Maybe not specific examples like that, but he knew how to lead a team and point them in the right direction and marshal forces to accomplish something, and lead with vision.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that can lead, but to lead with vision means you're going to take people to places where they may not even be thinking about that they can go. And so I give John a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And we're blessed to be able to have influential leaders like that. And that's part of the reason that I'm starting this podcast, is to showcase some of the leaders in our city and in our nation, and to encourage and inspire people that, you know, anything is possible, and right. Giving back. And that's what you've been doing. And I'm interested in hearing what's your vision for yourself, or your vision for the chamber. Share with us your vision.
Yeah, vision. You can look at it in, I guess, time segments, and it's hard. You know, there's that question that you ask people in an interview. It may not actually even be fair, but what do you envision in 5 years?
Yeah.
Well, there's different variables in that.
True.
And if you ask, what do I envision for Jackson in 5 years and where the chamber can influence that, we're going to continue to be successful attracting new jobs because we've got such a strong existing industry base here. They're going to continue to grow. That group is diverse so that we weather recessions very well. So that's a given. Where Jackson has got to continue to improve is we have got to continue to improve our public schools, access to education here in this community, and make that of utmost importance. And that's happening, and we're continuing to improve every day. We've got to continue to do things that make Jackson a better place for young people to want to continue to stay and move to. And that involves things like bike paths, greenways, running, bike sharing, events, live music, arts, a lot of the creative and cultural things that Jackson's good at, but we've got to get even better because I'll tell a story, it's not a story, it's a fact, is that 10 to 15 years ago, a college graduate or high school graduate, they might move to a place in the Midwest far away from their family to make $5,000 or $6,000 more a year.
Yes.
Now, high school and college graduates might move to a place like Chattanooga or Nashville and make that much less money and live in a house or an apartment half the size because they want the experience of those communities. And it's happening all the time. Jackson has got to continue to create more experiential offerings for people.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. And life in the world constantly evolves and changes and progresses, and it's important that we evolve as well. I'm interested in knowing, how have you been able to balance your career and ambitions with your family? Because you've held numerous leadership positions. How have you balanced that with having children and a family?
And I think I'm very fortunate to work in a job that I absolutely love. Every day is different. For instance, yesterday we had a group in Jackson, international group, looking at Jackson for a project, and we may or may not win that deal. Hopefully we do, but we're at bat. We got to meet 7 people, visited Jackson I never would have before. That in and of itself makes for a great job, and you're selling a community. I get to work with a great team here. So that part of it, the old saying is, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, yeah, there's days it is work, but this is a great situation here. It's fun selling Jackson. It's fun working on things to make us improve. And yeah, there's times it's like, oh my gosh, how are we going to get over that hurdle? But it always works out. Maybe not as quick as we want. So I think if you work in a spot that you love, but you place faith, family, and job in that order.
Okay.
And so what I've been able to do, with 3 kids, is to, and it doesn't always work out, but I would bet you my kids have played travel baseball, travel softball, football, participated in basketball, all kinds of sports. They're involved in activities. I have probably missed less than 5% of those. It's probably more like 1 or 2% of the games that they played over their, youth and high school careers, because I've been able to balance it.
Yeah.
And like for instance, my youngest son Matt plays on Friday nights. Well, I don't go out of town on Friday nights during football season.
Yeah.
And unless it might be a big project that we have to go to Japan or Europe to recruit, but that doesn't happen that often. And I think if you just prioritize for yourself, and then you make sure you're living your life based upon those priorities, it works out.
And, in my experience as a mental health counselor and marriage and family therapist, I see the brokenness. I see the struggles that families have, and not everyone has the philosophy that you have and, showing up and being there for your children. And that's amazing. I personally believe that the success of tomorrow's leaders begins with the success of today's families. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I 100% agree, because whatever, you can look at the same individual demographically, income level-wise, 2 people comparable, in growing up, and let's just say they both grow up in a bad environment or surroundings, but if they've got a family structure, and it may be a single mom or a single dad, but if that kid has someone in their life that is their advocate, and that they keep them, I've used an example, there are kids that you need to make sure that you raise, when you go bowling and you put the bumpers up.
Yes.
Kids need bumpers.
Yes.
And as they get older, those bumpers come down. But those children who grow up in our community that have someone that helps raise them with bumpers on, and then points them in the right direction, then praises them when they do well, and then show them if they're doing something wrong, helping them get back on the right path. Yeah, those are going to be leaders. Where we lose kids, is you're exactly right, is that family structure, and it's not perfect for everyone.
Yes.
But there's got to be someone who's an influencer in that kid's life to make sure that they maximize what they can be. Or otherwise, it's that whole debate about what do you want to do, build schools or jails? Well, yeah, that's part of it. But you've got to have people advocating for those kids, even obviously before they get into school. And so it's a whole big circle.
And I appreciate you mentioning, families are complex. It may be a single mother, it may be a single father. It could be a grandmother or an uncle or aunt raising a child. Family is different for everybody, but it's important. And sometimes we may be the only person in our family, supporting us. And it's so important that we support one another. And if you have a family member or a individual who may not have the support they need in their family, I want to help, support and create resources or connect them with resources, social worker, counselors, mentors that help support them, because it's needed.
Yeah,
No.
I was going to say, I think that's where maybe a lot of folks don't know that they can influence a situation, is that you may know of a situation where there's a kid that's not in the best environment, and he or she does not have the support that they need, but you're thinking, gosh, and it may be, I don't want to get involved in it, or I can't get involved because I don't have the time. Well, that may be true, but your role then might become a facilitator.
Yes.
Make someone else aware or point someone in the right direction and connect those dots, because there are organizations and people that can help, but they can't help if they don't know.
Yes. Exactly right. Well, Kyle, is there anything else that you'd like to say overall about leadership and how your life has been informed or changed or influenced in general?
I think you always continue to read and look and find people that you want to emulate and that you admire. And whatever field they're in, heck, it may be a local business owner, it may be a Sunday school teacher, it may be a governor or a president, whoever that is. Whatever they're doing that has made them a successful leader, figure that out and why, and then look at multiple people and what's consistent about that. What has made the people that you most admire successful? And I would bet for most of your listeners, it's going to be people that have put faith, family, and maybe job third. Job may not even be the third piece there. But if you've got faith and family at 1 and 2, typically everything else falls into place.
And you're very right. And randomly, I've chosen, people to in leadership positions that I've interviewed for this podcast. And almost everyone, in fact, I think everyone that I've interviewed, they've identified faith as being a part of their lives. And I didn't, pick Christians or people that, have a certain belief. And most times you don't know necessarily about people's, religious or faith beliefs until you talk to them. But every single person has mentioned that. And I think that's something to be said.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that whichever division of faith or religion is right for you, it centers you. And you need that center piece, and everything else will emanate out from that. But you've got to be grounded, and that's what faith does. And God's going to point you in the right direction, and He's going to put things in your path, good and bad, that will make you a better person.
Yes.
But you have to have that faith first to realize that's what's occurring.
Yes. You're definitely right. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for participating in this interview for my podcast. I really do appreciate your support in this endeavor.
Thank you, Alvin. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, as well as providing a rating and review. Every week, I will interview a different leader and invite them to share with us their views and perspective on the relationship between leadership and family. Be sure to visit my website. It's www.alvinbonds2nd.com. That's ALVINBONDSII.com. Have a great day.